In this tutorial, we'll take a look at extracting information that's specific to individual fish. I'm already in PTAGIS, I've logged in, and I'm going straight to Query Builder 2. If you don't remember how to do that, see the tutorial on the barged versus in-river juveniles. All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch this new query, and I can go straight in here to interrogation summary. Again, remember, don't use interrogation detail. That's going to open up a query that allows me to look at fish that were resighted at antenna throughout the Columbia system. And it already selects a given number of attributes over here. I want to make sure to add, for this query, I am interested in the length of a juvenile at emigration. And the hypothesis is that the length of a juvenile at emigration will affect the time that it spends in the ocean. So I want to make sure to come down here and add the length at which a fish was marked. So mark length. I also want to have first day. This is the day of year of first detection, or sorry, actually first year. A year of first detection. And so that's going to be the detection of the adult returning to the system, or a juvenile out-migrating through the system. And I also want to have release site and release year. Release site's already over here. Okay, one other handy piece of information that I can add in here is travel time. And that's actually going to calculate the number of days between observations. Okay, once I've made my query, I can go ahead and save that, just like before. And I'm going to save it in this folder. I'm going to call it something useful like tag length return time. And then run newly saved report will bring us back to this page. Before I run the report, I want to narrow down my selections, otherwise I will basically overcrowd the system. So let's go ahead and choose a given number of years, maybe 2007 through 2010. Let's also make sure we're using the right species. So Chinook is what this group is interested in, and they are also interested in looking at just spring and summer Chinook. So pull those over there. Now, they're just interested in Snake River fish, and so there's a number of different ways that we can narrow down this query. We could either narrow it down by release site subbasin. So in this case, to just select Snake River fish, you could basically go from select everything between the Asotin and Lake Wallula down to here. You could select all of those and bring them over. The other thing you could do is you could use release site river kilometer. I looked it up, and Lower Granite Dam is kilometer 522.173. So you could use that, or you could use release site at Lower Granite. Now this is going to be less inclusive than if you had selected release site subbasin, because these are again going to be only fish that were pit tagged at Lower Granite, whereas if you selected by subbasin down here, that would include fish that were tagged, like let's say up in the Asotin River where we did our field trip. So it's really up to you guys which fish you want to use for your particular queries. For this particular example, let's go ahead and just choose everything at Lower Granite. And these are fish that were tagged and released in a number of different locations. So for example, these fish were tagged and released into the facility bypass flume. These were released into the adult fish ladder, which are likely not juveniles. And these are juveniles that were released and subsequently barged, released and returned to the river, etc. So again, I don't know exactly what you guys want to choose which fish you want to choose to look at. But in this case, the more fish you select, the more data you're going to have. So I'm going to go ahead and choose all of these and send them over there. And then I can run my report. So this will take a second. And when it's done running, it gives me a list of 11,371 fish that were tagged as juveniles at Lower Granite Dam and then were re-sighted somewhere else in the system at a pit tag antenna. It also gives me the length at which a fish was tagged. And here I can also look to see if a fish is of hatchery origin, of unknown origin, or let's see if we can find a wild fish in this list. Well, none are turning up here. And here I'm getting fall Chinook, so it's possible that I didn't select that correctly. But we can go ahead and do that in our filters here. So to narrow this batch of fish down, I can go to Add Condition. Again, if this ribbon right here isn't showing, you can go to Data and then click on Add View Filter Condition. That will make this show up. First, let's go ahead and filter the run. Make sure that's in there. And we'll just select for spring Chinook because that's what this group is interested in. And that decreased the number of observations. Next, let's go ahead and add a filter for, in this case, I'm going to assume really all this group is interested in knowing is the time that these fish spend in the ocean before they return to the Columbia. And so if they use detections at Bonneville, they're going to have more data than if they use detections of adult returning to Lower Granite, because not all the fish that make it to Bonneville make it to Lower Granite. So let's go ahead and filter on Bonneville as a location. So for that, I'm going to go down here to Site. And it's simply called Site because this is an interrogation query. And so it's assuming that everything that you're looking for in here is a pit tag detection. And here I'm just going to go ahead and highlight everything that has Bonneville in it. Bring those over and leave the rest. Apply that filter. Okay, now I'm down to 531 detections. Next, those are fish, again, that were tagged at Lower Granite, went out to the ocean, and then were later detected at Bonneville. Because I put in this juvenile, these PH2 juvenile and BCC are both juvenile collectors. So I'd probably be better to leave those off. You can edit your selections by sending those back. And now all I have is the 4 different adult fish ladders at Bonneville. Let's go ahead and apply that. So I had 531 before. Now I have only 105. That's adults returning to Bonneville. Okay, let's go ahead and add 2 more conditions. The first is going to be release year. So let's look for fish that were released in 2007. And then were returned as adults in subsequent years. I guess you actually don't really have to, because that's made our list really small at this point. So all 4 of the fish that showed up here were tagged in 2007 and returned in 2009. Travel time over here is the number of days between marking date and recite date or detection. And remember that you have to be really careful in using the Bonneville ladders or Bonneville antennas, because here, BO3, this Washington Shore ladder, this fish was detected twice, and this fish was detected twice at Bonneville in different locations. So really, it's only 2 fish that have returned, so our sample size is pretty small. Let's try looking at a different release year. (2008). And in 2008, we have 65 fish that have returned. Now, this is going to also include some fish that were potentially detected in 2008. So to get rid of those, you can add another condition and filter down to first year. And so we will not include 2008 because that's our tag year, but we'll include all subsequent years. Okay, and that dropped 10 observations. So what we're left with is 55 data points. And again, remember there's duplicate values in here. And so what we're going to want to do is export this data to Excel. And again, I'm preferring to export it as a CSV. And just click on this button over here. Takes a second, and then you can pull up this data nicely organized in an Excel file. To check for those duplicate values, you can go to Highlight Cells Rules, down here to Duplicate Values, and then all my duplicate values are highlighted with pink, and I could go ahead and get rid of those. There's a number of different ways I could do that. Okay, so now remember that this group was interested in looking at the length of a juvenile relative to the time that it's spent in the ocean. So if I wanted to calculate the difference between 2008 and 2010 quickly in Excel, I can go over here and I can go Insert. Let's call this something like Time Ocean. Maybe ocean time. And remember, I can just type in a formula here. I can take this year of return minus the release year and do that for the entire column. So their hypothesis is that fish that are larger will return as jacks, whereas fish that are smaller, when they're tagged as juveniles, will return as later maturing adults. So very anecdotally here, it looks like they might have some data to support their theory. But really they're going to have to then take this column and this column and graph the two and see if that theory holds up. That is, of course, after they've gone ahead and gotten rid of all of these duplicate values, which is going to decrease their sample size considerably. And so really, I hope you're getting the picture here that when looking at adult returns, you're going to be dealing with a pretty small sample size. So for this very reason, you might actually choose to use juveniles that were tagged anywhere in the Snake River Basin. All right, for those of you interested in looking at hatchery versus wild, you can do a very similar sort of query, but just select based on what shows up in this column. And that's it for this tutorial.